I think I'm ready to suffer. I am more than ready to engage in some form of suffering. And the particular flavor of suffering that I have decided to engage in is watching a Classically Abby video. Now, in this particular video, Abby wants to tell people like me, men, not that there are certain people who believe that, that we should stop hooking up with women. Now, despite the fact that I don't generally do that, nonetheless, I have no problem with people doing that. So let's go ahead and see what Classically Abby has to say about men, hooking up, and relationships. And don't you love that happy-ass freeze frame? It just tells you what kind of video we're going to get into. It's going to be great, it's going to be new, it's going to be fresh, it's going to be hip, and it's going to be classic.
Hello, Classic Crew, and welcome to today's video, where we're going to be talking about why men should stop hooking up.
Okay, so, this is going to be fun.
I did a video entitled, Ladies, Stop Hooking Up, a few months ago. After making that video, many angry people said that I had different standards for men and for women. That I thought men could sleep around while women should wait. Here's the deal. Both men and women should stop hooking up. Honestly,
Okay.
If everyone could just wait until they got married, the world would be a much better place.
So, how, Abby? When taking like this happen, I have to wonder, what is the logical progression where it goes from people stop having sex as often as they do, and then suddenly the world becomes better? Like, I can understand people making a living wage. The world becomes better because then people aren't starving. I can understand if people didn't beat each other, the world would be better because then people would not be enacting violence towards one another, except in self-defense. So now we have to worry about this. Abby, if everybody just stops having sex before marriage, how does this functionally make the world a better place? Because you've laid out the syllogism here. If everybody stops having sex before marriage, premise A, we don't have a premise B yet, but the conclusion is the world will be a better place. So let's see if this syllogism actually can get a premise B, and let's see if we can actually get anything out of it.
So men, here's my advice to you. Stop hooking up. In many ways, not hooking up is harder for men, and it's a lot harder to get across to them why it's bad for them. There appear to be only positives and upsides to it because the immediate negative consequences aren't as obvious.
Maybe because they don't exist, depending on what negative consequences you're going to try to argue we have. Let's find out.
But just because you can have sex in a way that seems like it's carefree, doesn't mean that's actually the case. You might think that you'll have street cred if you sleep with a certain number of women. That's a bunch of lies. First of all, sleeping with a certain number of women to prove to your male friends that you can keep up is a useless endeavor.
Holy shit! We actually agree with Abby! Holy fucking shit. Congratulations, Abby. You actually made a point that I agree with. And I will call it out when it happens. Yes, but not for the reason you think. Now, I don't know what reason Abby is going to use to justify this particular stance. I know what reason I would use for it. And that is that if you are using the amount of women that you've slept with for some type of street cred, then my thought is that you are quantifying these people in your head as objects. And when you engage in that kind of behavior, you are simply boiling women down to how useful they've been to you, instead of actually who they are as a person. That's a bit of disgusting behavior, and it's disgusting behavior that I know that I used to engage in way back when. Though that's probably about 10 years ago or so now. Either way, the point is, I agree with this take. I do not know what reason Abby's going to bring for this take, but I do agree with it.
The same guys who care or would be impressed with your number are the same guys who don't deserve your respect in the first place.
So, I agree with that, but that's not the strongest argument. Like, I think it's a more compelling argument to just point out that you've boiled women down to objects in your head, and that's wrong. than just saying you shouldn't be hanging out with those people in the first place.
And at the end of the day, it won't make people like you. It will rot your relationships and poison your friendships. Being confident in who you are, personable, fun, and charming will make you cooler and more popular than any number of women that you sleep with would. Second, a good woman would love to be with a man who saved himself for marriage and for her.
So, I'm going to go and say this one right now. I don't necessarily agree. Here's my reasoning why. There are plenty of women who I know as friends who do not care whether or not you have slept with someone. Moreover, if you're going to hold the position that you saved yourself for them, can I tell you guys a story about a relationship that I was in before? In this relationship, I was with somebody, and I was with them for about 3-4 years. And they were a virgin before we met, and they were a virgin before we got together. However, it was the fact that they were a virgin that ended up leading to a lot of problems in the relationship. Because when we actually did finally have sex, it was wonderful, it was great, but they did not know enough about their body, and I, being the asshole that I was back then, didn't know enough to actually try to properly explore and figure things out. Over time, this led to a giant rift in the relationship, and eventually she ended up getting with someone who did satisfy her. And you know what? Good for them. We're not on speaking terms anymore, but it doesn't matter for the sake of the conversation. The point of the matter is that if you save yourself only for marriage, you might find that you end up in an essentially sexually incompatible relationship. That is essentially what happened with me. If you find yourself in such a relationship, saving yourself was functionally useless. Now, me and this person didn't get married, but like I said, we were together for 4 years, and we lived together for 3 of those years. So, via common law, I guess, fact of the matter is, saving yourself for a particular relationship doesn't suddenly make it better. In many ways, it can actually make it worse, because you end up coming in inexperienced. That's not saying that you need to go out and just try to get experience before you get married. You do whatever is most comfortable for you, but I do want to provide the counterpoint here.
She will know that you take sex seriously enough to wait for the right person.
So, I'm going to go ahead and say right now, by this particular definition, a career dominatrix does not take sex seriously. And I don't agree with that take.
There's a male fear that if you're a virgin, it would indicate that you have no appeal or that you're bad at sex. That's not the way it works.
So, I think this is going to be another part where I have to agree with Abby. But can I just say that there's no way to say that you're bad at sex if you've never had it? That's a weird point.
A woman won't think that no woman would sleep with you. She will think that you had options and still made the harder choice. Good?
No, not necessarily. Abby, not every woman is you. There are some women who will not, for whatever reason, date somebody who has not had sex with somebody else first because they don't want to deal with somebody who's inexperienced. They don't want to put themselves into a teacher role. Take somebody who is a submissive. They need to be in a relationship with somebody, more than likely, who is able to be a dominant for them, who's able to actually fulfill that role for them and fulfill it well. If you have somebody who has never had any experience walking into a relationship with this particular person, they're not going to be able to fulfill that role. They're probably not going to have the confidence required. They're not going to have the experience required. They're not going to be able to do anything in that particular relationship except be toxic. Because when you have somebody who's walking into a BDSM type relationship like that, and they are not experienced walking in, they end up being a caricature of what they think a dom or a sub is, and it leads to incredibly toxic behaviors, like trying to be overly controlling for your partner, or trying to be overly clingy for your partner in a very unhealthy way, because you're acting like the thing you think you should be, instead of actually learning what that thing is. You can't make the point that people will think A or people will think B, because, Abby, you're not all people. You're not all women. You're not all people, and you definitely do not have that kind of knowledge.
Good women want a good man. And if you're confident in your choice to wait until marriage, it will only reflect well on you. Plus, when you get married, now you get to learn how to have sex together. And that's a beautiful opportunity for you both. And hopefully, since you'll be married your whole lives, you'll have plenty of time to figure out how to have a great sex life.
Not necessarily. Sometimes there are people who have entirely different sexual needs and are not going to be able to be compatible in their relationship as a result. Sometimes these people might find out that they love each other more than anything in the world, but the only way that they can actually manage a relationship together is to fulfill some of their sexual needs elsewhere. You may have somebody who likes both men and women, or people in between, and you don't fit the bill for all of that, and they want to have an experience with those other people. You may find yourself in a polyamorous relationship where certain needs are being met by certain partners. You may find yourself in a relationship that is wonderful everywhere except the sex, and that ends up being the thing that drives a wedge in between you and your partner over time. There are a myriad of situations that will happen and come from this, and it's not that you can just figure out how to work. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes you find out a year or two into a relationship that you are, sorry for the burp, dating somebody who is asexual and has a very low libido. And you walked into that relationship with a very high libido, and you are certainly not ace. You are attracted to anyone who you happen to fall in love with. You may be demi, you may be whatever under the sun, basically anything that is not ace. In this particular relationship, there's going to have to be some massive compromises. You two are not going to just figure out sex. That's not a thing that's going to happen in the way that you think it is, Abby. You seem to have this idea that everybody is in a perfect little bubble and they can all work themselves out if they just try hard enough, if they just use their bootstraps and pull them up and everything will work out. But that's not how reality works. Sometimes people love each other and just aren't compatible. Sometimes people are incredibly sexually compatible and realize they don't love each other. The world is not this easy black and white area where you can just be classic all the time.
Third, having multiple partners before marriage does not add to your relationship.
What about multiple partners during marriage, Abby? Just speaking as the poly person here, I'm just asking.
It opens the door to comparisons, jealousies, and other drama, especially if one or both of the partners has a history of no strings attached hookups.
So I got a question, Abby. Would it not breed jealousy and comparisons if you just watched porn? Like, you wouldn't even be in a relationship with somebody else, but you have just watched porn. You're going to be breeding those comparisons. It doesn't matter if you've had sexual relationships with people before or not. You're going to end up finding some way to pull those comparisons out. It's going to happen eventually. And if you are that magical 1 in a million person who doesn't have that issue, congratulations. That's great. Not everybody's like that.
And even though those feelings can be dealt with, it's easier when they're not there to begin with. You might think there won't be any consequences regarding pregnancy if you sleep with someone because, hey, you're a man. Guess what? You are responsible for the child that you helped to create, even if you're not the one carrying it. And that child will change the course of your life.
This one is true. So I have to tell you all in the audience who are watching, please, if you're going to engage in no strings attached sexual intercourse of any kind, please do yourself a favor, wear a condom.
And choosing to end that child's life through abortion is not a solution. You will
Actually, yes, it is. It is by definition a solution.
still carry the death of your unborn child with you. Taking the life of your own child so that you can continue to sleep around promiscuously is a horrific way to live.
That is not generally why people have abortions. There may be a minority of people who have abortions so that they can continue to sleep around. But in reality, consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy. Consent to sex is not consent to having children. If you find yourself having a child and you do not want that child, it's in your body. You have the ability to terminate it. You should be allowed to terminate it. There's no point in time where that child should have more authority over your body than you have over your own body. There's no point in time where anybody should have more authority over your body than you have over your own body. So whenever you try to make this point that people are just aborting so that they can keep sleeping around, sure, there might be somebody who does that, but that's not generally what happens. There's also a classist take here as well. We'll just go ahead and call her classistly Abby for a second, because how does this affect a sex worker? Let's say you are a male or female prostitute. You consented, even sometimes via contract, to sexual relations with a person. You did not consent to pregnancy. There's no point in time where you consented to pregnancy. In fact, actually, there are times where you should be able to sign a waiver saying you do not consent to a pregnancy because you are here, or you do not at least consent to covering cost of a child. You are here for one thing and one thing alone, and that is to fulfill the pleasures of your client. You are not here to become a father. You are not here to become a mother. If you have this take that somebody's leading a horrible life because they want to just sleep around, what happens to the sex worker? What happens to the person who does this to survive, and it is a better option for them to do this to survive than it is to work, say, a minimum wage job? This person isn't a hypothetical person. Sex workers exist. And taking the stance that a sex worker should not be allowed to do with what their body and essentially their capital that they choose is an incredibly narrow-minded and stupid take. Now, I understand that Abby is definitely not pro-sex worker. I understand that going into this, but I am. So I'm going to go ahead and point out that this is classist and it's bullshit.
You might think that you won't catch feelings if you sleep around. Even if you don't catch feelings, you're training yourself to think of sex as no more than a physical act. You are training yourself to view it as eating or going to the bathroom or any other physical need you just have to fulfill.
And there's nothing wrong with that. However you view sex, as long as it doesn't come at the cost of somebody else, fine.
You are losing all of the more important and beautiful aspects of being intimate. Also, you are sleeping with...
Can I point out before we continue here? So this is not a thing I can do, okay? I'm Demi. I don't really get attracted to people sexually until I've already caught fucking feelings. That's just not a thing I have any control over. But for people who don't have that issue, for people who are able to just see somebody as sexy and they have sex with them, they might catch feelings, but so what? They're responsible for their feelings, not you. Why are you trying to step in and tell them what they can or can't do with their bodies based on a hypothetical scenario where they might catch feelings? Yeah, they might. Hell, some people might end up catching feelings and realizing that the person they slept with is somebody they want to be with, and they might end up getting married. And who are you to stand in the way of that? There's nothing wrong with that scenario.
With another person, and it's not all about you. You might be leading this woman on or giving her the wrong idea, and that's just plain wrong. You might think that you just like sex and you want to do it no matter what. STDs, pregnancy scares, hurting women who actually care about you, treating sex like a compulsion, and losing out on the opportunity to meet the right woman isn't fun.
So I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. We'll tackle each of these bit by bit. So we're going to rewind her video so that we can tackle each of these reasons that she's used, because there are some that are good reasons, and there are, of course, some that are not.
I think that you just like sex and you want to do it no matter what. STDs.
So, start with STDs. Wear proper protection, make sure you understand what's going in, and you know what? If you are a sexually active person and you engage with other people, then maybe you should go ahead and take a couple of cues from the polyamorous or swinger side of relationships, okay? From somebody who went from the swinger side of sexual promiscuity to going into polyamorous sides, because I realized through swinging that, oh shit, I'm catching feelings because I don't have control over that. That's literally how I figured out I was poly. I figured out I was poly after a freaking swingers party. But if you are in that situation, people who are in those communities, as somebody who's in that community, I can tell you what we do. We get tested. We go and we figure out if we have something. Because there are certain terms that are used in the polyamorous community, things like fluid bonding. And before you fluid bond with a partner, you go and get tested. You do this for a myriad of reasons. One, it's out of respect for the partner you already have. If I have two partners, and partner A doesn't want to get an STD, and partner B has one, my relationship with partner B will significantly affect my relationship with partner A, or significantly affect of it. Unfortunately, the stigma around actually getting tested to figure out if these things are there is an issue. Now, it's a stigma that the polyamorous community has mostly figured out. We just go and do it and then figure out if we want to fluid bond with a partner after we know if anybody has anything. There's nothing wrong with that. So let's go ahead and go to her next reason.
Pregnancy scares.
So pregnancy scares happen. This is, again, a reason why you need to get protection.
Hurting women who actually care about you.
So if I and another person get into a relationship together, that is a relationship that is based on mutual consent. Now, if we both decide that we don't want a relationship with each other, but we do want to have sex, we want to have a no strings attached one night or even couple nights of doing stuff, and we go in with the knowledge, the consent towards each other that this is no strings attached, somebody might get hurt, yes, but it's our responsibilities as adults to figure that out when we get there. If you do lead somebody on, though, telling them that you're going to be in a relationship with them and then you just use that to sleep with them, that is manipulative. That is hurtful. That is bad. But if you are going in and there is a mutual understanding that this is just a sexual encounter, then there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I came from a swinger community first. That was pretty normal there to have no strings attached sexual encounters, and sometimes you just ended up breeding friendships with the people that you had sexual encounters with. You ended up having them over for freaking bingo. Well, not bingo in our case, but anyways.
Treating sex like a compulsion.
So, treating sex like a compulsion. This is something that is probably more healthy to do in a relationship where partners understand each other's sexual needs. It is certainly an issue to treat sex as a compulsion when you don't have somebody's informed consent. But I don't know what framework Abby's actually using for this. I think just treating sex as a compulsion, regardless of scenario, to her is bad.
And losing out on the opportunity to meet the right woman isn't fun.
So, okay. Let's go ahead and say that you are sleeping with multiple people. And then you meet the right woman, whoever the right woman is. What's to say that you don't just start the relationship with them and then you stop sleeping around because now you are in a relationship with somebody, a committed relationship with the consent and the conversation that you two are now a thing together, and that's it. There's nothing stopping people from doing that. They do it all the time. So I don't see how this one is actually a negative, seeing as this isn't a thing that actually tends to happen as much. You don't lose out on the right person just because you slept with someone else before your relationship with them. If they were willing to not have a relationship with you because you slept with somebody else before getting into a relationship with them, like you hadn't agreed to a relationship with them yet, and they're upset that you slept with somebody else beforehand, maybe they're not actually the right person for you. Maybe their priorities do not align with the priorities of people who have their own personal freedoms. But that's just me.
Hooking up is wasting your time. It's like
Is it, though?
endlessly scrolling on Twitter, swiping on Tinder, or playing video games mindlessly for hours on end.
Okay, cool. Sex is like video games. Great. I'll remember that. I'll fuck myself to RuneScape. That's what I'm going to do from now on. So, Abby, you do understand that the activities that you listed there are not necessarily wastes of time. For me, when I'm scrolling through Twitter, I'm finding things that I need to respond to on my channel. It's literally part of my job. When I'm playing video games mindlessly, that's my time to decompress from everything that I deal with on the political landscape of YouTube. There's nothing wrong with engaging in leisure activities. Sex is a leisure activity. It can be an intimate activity too, but primarily it can be one of leisure. It can be one of decompressing. It can be one of having a moment where you are not dealing with the woes of the day. If you're going to shit on people for simply having time to decompress, which most of the things you labeled out there are, video games, sex, scrolling through social media, if you're going to shit on people for decompressing, it makes perfect sense that you made a video entitled, I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was the one where she said that taking time for yourself having a mental health day, all that shit is bad, don't do that. I understand where that take came from now, Abby.
You are titillating yourself for the surge of dopamine that takes meaning out of your life. Let's be honest.
The dopamine takes meaning out of my life? Boy, tell that to my depression. Please. Tell that to my depression. Sometimes I wish that dopamine would actually come. But, you know, go on. Not like you give a shit about people who actually have mental issues.
Honest. Getting married is one of the most important choices you can make in your life. It sets you on the path of meaning. It's vindicating to love and be loved by someone who you would give everything to and who would do the same for you.
So there's nothing saying that you can't have that journey with someone later. Also, if you want to keep on leaving out polyamorous people who embark on this journey with people and also sleep with other people, like, go right ahead. But at the end of the day, you're just excluding people for no reason on communities you don't even understand. But I do like the little platitude in there. This sets you on the path of meaning. Abby, I have a question. Can you define that? Because meaning means something different to every single person. It doesn't matter if you think that meaning is X, Y, or Z, if I think meaning is A, B, or C. Personal meaning to both of us can be completely and totally different. The difference between the two of us seems to be that I acknowledge that.
People think of marriage as something for the future. They say they're too selfish to get married, or too immature, or they're just not ready for such a huge commitment. You may have used these excuses yourself, or you've definitely heard a friend say them. But here's the truth. You don't flip a switch that tells you that you're ready to get married. You don't flip a switch at 30 or when you've slept with a certain number of women or at any other life milestone and know that it's time for you to settle down. Your own mentality and the choices that you make are the only things that can prepare you to get married. You have to take the steps to make you capable of marriage. And that starts with stopping hooking up.
So again, not necessarily. There are people who are perfectly capable of engaging in a long-term committed one-on-one relationship, but prior to that agreement, they slept around. These people exist. They are not few and far between. But Abby seems to think that this is not a thing that happens. You have to prepare yourself for this commitment. Yes, if you're going to get married, you've got to prepare yourself for that commitment. But there are people, and I cannot stress this enough. There are swingers. There are polyamorous people. There are people who enter into a sexless relationship who are not prepared for that kind of relationship, who do not fall into these easy, neat, definable categories that classically Abby is trying to use for people. There are people who are sex workers, who make their living doing that, and might have a partner who is entirely okay with the fact that they're dating a sex worker or a porn star or whatever particular profession they work in that field, and they realize, oh, there's nothing wrong with this. There are people who have a myriad of different types and styles of relationships, Abby. Not every single one of them is a neat, one-on-one, cis-het. I don't even want to say vanilla because it's not necessarily that it's boring. Not everybody has that exact same type of relationship style, though.
Because hooking up doesn't just stop you from moving forward. It actively moves you back. Now, here's the thing. Sex is awesome. I can say that as a married woman. But sex before marriage sucks.
No, it doesn't. All the sex that I've had, with very few exceptions, has been great, and I haven't been married. What? Sex that I had while swinging was great. Sex that I had in polyamorous relationship was great. One-on-one sex has been great. Group sex has been great. And all of it was done while not married. Most of it done in committed relationships. Relationships that lasted for years. Abby, I'm not sure if you actually have a good criteria for any of this shit. At all.
Even if you want to say it's fun, it means nothing, leads to nothing, and prolongs those relationships that don't have a future. Having sex before marriage is irresponsible and sad. Don't lose out on the women who you might actually have a future with by casually sleeping with the women who you know are not right for you.
So, it may be that somebody is not right for you to be in a relationship with, but they're perfectly adequate as a friend with benefits. They're perfectly adequate as a sex partner for a single night. They're perfectly adequate as a swinging partner. There are people who you might not want to be in relationships with at all, who can fulfill all these needs and are ready and willing to fulfill these needs because they have similar ones. They might not see you as a compatible partner, but they can see you as a compatible sexual partner. There's nothing wrong with that. There's also a last point that I want to make here, and it's a point that was made in the chat, and I want to echo it real quick. Abby, you do know that there are people who want to be in long-term committed relationships, but do not necessarily want to get married. Because marriage is a legally binding contract, and there are certain people who do not want to be part of that type of contract. They don't want to deal with any of that. They might be in a relationship that is frowned upon in their country, and they can't get married because they're not legally allowed to. See people who were in interracial relationships and people who were in gay relationships before those things became legally allowed in the United States. Abby, your position reeks of privilege. You have the privilege, from what I can tell, to be heterosexual. You have the privilege to be cis. You have the privilege to be a monogamous person. You have a privilege to be the poster child for everything that is standard and boring in the world. Not everybody fits into that little bubble. Not everybody's comfortable making the particular commitments that you want to make. But there's nothing wrong with any of that.
Don't lose out on what sex can really mean to you by bringing sex to its basest level. The more you treat sex like another bodily need, the more difficult it will be for you to turn it into something more when you really love someone. Some feminists say that women should act more like men and hook up in the same way that men do. But here's the truth. Men should act more like women. Treat sex with the respect it deserves.
Okay, so this is incredibly sexist. First of all, you're assuming that men just by default did not respect sex, and you're assuming that women did respect sex. It's not that either of them actually respected sex. It's that society had a group of bullshit standards, and those standards included women going into relationships as virgins and men being able to do whatever they wanted. Those are standards that are generally ubiquitous across society right now. They're bullshit. They're stupid. We can at least both agree with that. The answer to this, though, is not to shame people into fulfilling the standard that you think. The answer to this is to tell people to stop being bound by bullshit, arbitrary societal standards. But you know, Abby, it's fine. If you want to keep on telling people in your stupid way that it's okay for you to sit on the other side of the screen and shame them because you have the privilege to be in a position where you don't need to deal with any of this, then that's on you. But I'm going to tell my audience who are watching this, whoever you are, whatever your needs may be, whatever makes you comfortable, as long as you and the people you are participating with are engaging in informed, enthusiastic consent, then whatever you do is fine. You're all adults. Trust yourselves to do the right thing. And if you don't do the right thing, then do the right thing to fix it. But don't sit here and limit yourself because some random conservative Barbie on the internet is telling you to.
Don't waste your time sleeping around and treating sex like it's just another bodily need. Don't waste your time sleeping around instead of finding someone to spend your life with and actually moving your life forward.
Have you considered that maybe this is the same type of mentality that breeds incels? Where they are constantly waiting for the right person and therefore end up being involuntarily celibate and sexually frustrated? And then through this particular mentality, these people end up hating women who do sleep around and are sexually free and start slut-shaming them and viewing them as lesser and inferior? Gee, Abby, it would be really awkward if there were a subgroup of people on the internet who exhibited these toxic behaviors that were built up from the particulars that you're trying to lay out.
Don't waste your time sleeping around and becoming a stagnant version of yourself who doesn't grow or change.
It really did sound like she said stagnant version.
But instead stays treating sex like a cool new toy instead of a God-given gift. Marriage doesn't just happen.
Have you considered that a cool new toy could be a God-given gift? Are you an idiot?
To you. It's something you build your life towards and prepare yourself for. And when something as great as marriage is waiting for you, you want to start making yourself ready as soon as possible. So if you actually want to be a good man and have a good relationship, stop hooking up. And be the kind of man that any woman would want as a husband. Thank you so much for watching today.
Nope, I don't want to hear your thanks. Because I don't want you to thank me when I willingly subjected myself to the torture that is your stupid YouTube channel. So, what conclusions can we reach here? Aside from the fact that Abby is definitely classist, because all of these takes necessarily alienate sex workers. Aside from the fact that Abby is incredibly privileged, because if she weren't, she wouldn't be making takes that alienated people who were in swinger societies, people who are polyamorous, people who are asexual, people who have low sex drives and libidos, people who don't fit into the neat, tidy box that Abby finds herself in, at least I assume finds herself in. I can conclude that most of the information in this video was basically useless. Now, there was some stuff in here that I did agree with, though the reason I agreed with them weren't necessarily the same. I agree that we should not use sex as a weapon. We should not be in relationships with people we shouldn't be in, and we should not hurt other people's feelings by leading them on. But none of these were the reasons that Abby gave. She just assumed that having sex with people damaged them as a baseline, as an axiom, and then went on from there. She didn't actually give definitive reasons why these things are harmful or why they can be harmful. She just assumed that they were and carried on with the conversation. This is not good content. Not that I can say anything about that. My content's garbage too. Point of the matter is, though, this is the type of language that literally breeds incels. This is the type of language that seems harmless at first, but once internalized, breeds incredibly toxic behaviors. Not just masculine ones. This is not a toxic masculinity thing. This is a thing that is just toxic in general. And it doesn't sound that way. It sounds nice. It sounds fluffy. And I think that's the problem with conservative people like Abby. Their language sounds nice and fluffy and wonderful until you give it more than 2 seconds of thought. That's the problem with a lot of this. It is very intuitive, but it doesn't actually jive with material reality, and that's kind of the problem. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more on my channel and of what I do, then please go ahead and go in the description and check everything out there. You can find my Patreon there, and while you're down there, there's also a bell notification icon and a like button you can click as well. But before you hit that bell icon, you might want to hit subscribe. If you haven't done so, that's probably a good thing to do. But in any case, thank you for watching the video. Thank you all for being here. It really means a lot to me. We're going to move into Patreon slides, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful end of your day. And beginning, and practically every part in the middle. Honestly, I really hope your day doesn't suck. Mine does right now.